Thank you everybody for coming tonight. We've got some exciting news with the Creation Research Society Conference. I went down there. Yeah, we had a great time. A lot of seeds were planted there. I met the president of the college again, the pastor, and I met 30 students who wanted to start a creation club down there. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun. They asked me, I was going to do it last year, go down to the creation conference, but somebody told me, don't waste your time. Their minds are made up. Go to the homeschoolers. And so that's what I did last year. What changed this year is they gave us a voice. They had these workshops, geology, engineering, astronomy, and biology. They wanted input on ideas that would help advance the creation model. And so that's what we were looking for. That's what I wanted. I've got some ideas. My idea is let people think. Give them two models. Let them think critically about it. They had an education roundtable where we could discuss ideas and how to promote origins. And my idea there is, hey, put predictions out there. Let us think critically and put predictions out there. This is what I really enjoyed. After I signed up, they wanted to showcase creation-related accomplishments. It's not just the PhDs telling us what to think. They wanted to know what people on the ground were doing. And so I designed this brochure. I don't know if you guys got it last time or not. I had a debate on the Grand Canyon, so I funneled people into that. And on the inside, my big thing is I want to change the discussion. The argument's not science versus religion. The argument is blind chance versus creation. And once we change that dynamic, I think we win. I mean, it's absurd to think this library got put together by chance, right? How much more absurd to think our bodies got put together that way. But if that's all people see, they just memorize. They just conform. We need people to think critically. And I mentioned this thing to some Hydroplate proponents, and 4 of them came. And we got Bill Wells. He's standing next to me. He was a fighter pilot and a pilot for Delta. And then we got Matt Welburn, who's got some nuclear background, and then Pastor Kevin Lee from Port Orchard, Washington. So he came up all the way across the continent to get to Pensacola. And I'm so excited about what those two are doing. They started Hydroplate University, hptuniversity.com. They've got a YouTube channel, Hydroplate Theory University. And it's so important. Pastor Lee, he just retired as a pastor so he can focus on this full time. He's the guy who he's got orbital physics in his background, so he knows that what NASA is telling us can't happen according to the Big Bang. And so he's getting it on tape, and I'm so thankful for that. And he's also in discussions. He's talked to NASA scientists, the lead one for the Stardust mission. He's currently talking to a professor at a state university, and she realizes you can't get these contact binaries and asteroids with the Big Bang. But if there was a water atmosphere around it, it would work, and that's what the hydroplate theory would do. And I thought, well, as long as I'm going down there, I might as well plant some creation seeds. And so I spoke in Wisconsin, a packed house on a Sunday night. And that was pretty encouraging to see, because I talked to somebody at the Creation Conference, and he said, the science we got the science, and modern science supports us. We've got the books and the videos and the speakers. We've got all that. He said the weak link is the pastors. Pastors who are unwilling to take a stand on this. And he said that, when he speaks, he gets full houses when he goes out to Washington and Oregon and Connecticut, these liberal places. And I think that's because the pastors have to work together to sort of survive that environment. And so they get all their churches come together and hear him speak. He says, but that doesn't happen in other places. They won't work together with other churches. And again, you've heard me say about, I was at a table with a state representative, a state senator, president of the city council, and the senator said, don't make the homeschoolers mad, they're organized. And I thought, well, why doesn't he say that about the church? We focus on what divides us instead of what unites us, and what could unite us is they're teaching errors to our kids in the textbooks. And so if we can focus on that one, unite around that one, and get the errors taken out, and then focus on what divides us. And there was, after this talk, and you can see this talk on my YouTube channel, I just put it up this week. At the very end, there's a U of M student there, and he's very involved in the Christian organization there.
I'm just going to say at school in Minnesota, every student is required to take a geology class, and I just took my geology class this last semester. And it's so true, like he was saying, how much stuff every day he said, we don't really know, we can't really explain this, and we don't really know that. But what is sad is that I had a friend who took that class with me who was one of my C group leaders, like my discipleship group leader, my first year at school, and he is no longer a Christian because he took that class. Because nobody teaches creation anymore. All we hear is the other perspective. I had another friend who he went to school and stopped believing in creation, started believing in theistic evolution. Then it kind of snowballed into not believing the Bible is all true, and now he's an atheist. So it's just sad, the snowball effect that we can think, oh, creation's, it's not that important if you believe God created the world or not, or how you believe God did that, but it is important. It'll shake your faith if you don't know what you believe.
So this is a foundational issue, and pastors are unwilling to take a stand on it, and it's hurting the body of Christ. You know, Bill Wells, he says when he was a fighter pilot, he had full confidence in his weapon system. You know, the offensive and the defensive weapons. And he says, you know, this hydroplate theory, he's got full confidence in the hydroplate theory. He says, this is how we can witness to people. And he says, we're not equipping the soldiers in the battle well enough. And so we need to get the pastors. And when I was talking to the guy at the conference, I said, well, let's forget about the pastors. If they don't believe what God said or don't stand on what God says, let's just go to the people. Let's just have a grassroots thing going. And so that's what we're doing. There was a church in Florida that wanted me to speak. And there was this was in Pensacola, and there was another one that wanted me to speak in Milton that day. And I said, well, I'm booked that day. And he said, well, can you speak the next Sunday? And I said, well, that would mean I'd have to spend a week at the beach. It's like, okay. Didn't have to twist my arm. And so we got the family together. You know, normally we don't get together for Christmas. We're all in different states. So we got a place at the beach and just had a ball. I love going in the ocean. It is so much fun getting beat up. And then I spoke at the church in Milton. And they were so generous. Those churches, those 3 churches pretty much covered the cost if I wouldn't have had a mishap in Tennessee. But they were very generous. And then we get down there on Wednesday, and they got a Wednesday night service at the campus church in Pensacola Christian College. And they had 4 speakers, 4 scientists speak, and Eric Hovind emceed it all. It was wonderful. And that Dr. Mark Horstemeyer, he's really, really intelligent, really good. And that Joel Brown, he ran the thing. He was super, super good. But afterwards, I went up to the pastor. And I said, Pastor Redlin, you guys got chapel 4 times a week for the college students here. What if you had a creationist come in every month or 2, and before they speak to the students, they talk to the community the night before? It could be an outreach. PCC could be a beacon of creation light in this area. And he liked the idea, but he said, I'm not the college. So the next morning, Thursday morning, before the conference started, I went to the president's office at the college and bounced the idea off of the receptionist there, and she gave me an email address. And then we started the conference, and they opened with a devotion, and I won't give you everything, but this is what really popped out to me. He talked about this big fire in London, 1666, destroyed 80-some churches. And then this Christopher Wren, he's the founder of the Royal Society. He was designing and building these cathedrals, and he's just walking through. Nobody knows who he is, and he's asking the workers, you know, what are you doing? And one said, I'm cutting a piece of stone. And another one said, you know, what are you doing? I'm earning 5 shillings, 2 pence a day. Basically, I'm working to feed my family. And then he asked another one, he says, I'm helping Sir Christopher Wren build a beautiful cathedral so people can worship God. You know, what are we doing? You know, what are we doing that has an eternal impact? You know, we are doing something. Let's have a big impact. Like I used to say, people say, what are you doing? I give creation talks. Well, I think I do a little more than that. I equip people to stand on God's word and expose Satan's lies so they can help people keep their faith. And so anyhow, but yeah, what are we doing? We're all part of a big puzzle that God's putting together. We need to use our gifts for his kingdom. And I think that's where the real joy is, when we use our God-given gifts and glorify him. And then during the conference, some of the highlights, it says science leads to God, and we probably know this, the first law of thermodynamics, you can't get matter from nothing. You have to have a supernatural creator making a natural creation. That's what makes sense. The second law of thermodynamics, in layman's terms, things fall apart. They don't get more organized. And yet, we got the universe is winding down. The stars are burning up. You know, the things are, it's like, well, what wound it up? How did it get all this organization? And then information comes from a mind. Like, this thing just didn't happen by chance. It has a message, there's information in it, and there's a medium. And one of the most complex mediums out there is DNA. It's got the information for how to build ourselves. And we've got good information going bad with mutations. So the big question is, where'd the good information come from? And that points again to God. And then the sediments and the fossils point to a flood. And then we had Thursday was a big workshop day. There was a lot of presentations in geology. And Nate Loper, he did this one talk, and the thing that popped out at me was Sunset Crater. That was dated at 270 million years. 270 million years. That's radiometric dating. We can count on that, right? Put it in the textbooks. But then they found a human settlement underneath that layer. So they had to throw that date out because humans only got here like 1 million years ago, you know, depending on how you define it. So that, and it's similar to KBS Tuft and Skull 1470. KBS Tuft was like 200 million years. And then they found a human skull underneath it. And so they had to keep dating it until it fit their story. And then they didn't even use the radiometric dating. They used other fossils, the pigs or the elephants. And the pigs won because they knew when the pigs went extinct. So that's how they dated it. It's just a big fiasco. Okay, and so then we had this workshop where we could provide ideas that advanced the creation model. And so Bill got up there and gave his ideas and pointed people to the hydroplate. And I got up there and I, encouraged people we need to teach people to think critically. We need 2 models. Evolutionists aren't going to do it, but so we can lead by example. There's 2 flood models, put them both in the museum. That's the next domino to fall. Which creation museum is going to allow people to think about flood models? And I pointed out where you can get this book. You have access to this book for free, all of it, at creationscience.com. Whoops. creationscience.com. It's phenomenal. And so a lot of people were doing that. And then I asked, this is the main reason I went down there. I asked this question: why is a theory that makes accurate predictions ignored? And so when I got done, I said, yeah, there's some good websites out there. If anybody's interested, I got these handouts. And when I sat down, everybody around me, hey, can I get one of those? Can I get one of those? Can I get one of those? There's 3 people that asked for it right away. And it's like, yeah, you can. So now you can see the hydroplate and think and analyze it yourself, not just take somebody's word about it. And I encourage them to go into page 447 to 449 and look at the accurate predictions, because that's the currency of science. And I am so excited because this book is available to the public now, Amazon.com, and it's what, $89? But on July 9th, the 7th edition was $125. The 8th edition was $180. And the 8th edition was $30 when I got it. So that's the sign of a good book, when it holds value over decades. It's not like a college textbook where you can't use it the next semester. And then in that workshop, there was a guy who made fossils. He put them under 3,000 psi, pounds per square inch, and like 300 or 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and you make these fossils. And he made this coal. He squeezed 5 or 6 inches of something, just squished it down there to make 1 inch of coal. And it's like, to get 3,000 psi, you need 3,000 feet of sediment. It's like, how do you get all that pressure? And so that was a lot of fun. And then on that Thursday night, I went around and I talked to college students. After the event was over, I talked to college students, met a whole bunch of them that were interested in starting a creation club on campus. And then Friday morning, the president of the college was there to kick it off. So I got to talk to him. Have a creationist come in once every month or 2 and have it be an outreach to the community. And he goes, I never considered it, but now he's considering it. And then that afternoon, we had the education roundtable where we were supposed to be able to discuss ideas and how to promote origins. And I was rather disappointed in this because we really didn't have much of a voice. We pretty much listened to a presentation. There was a few times when we could have our input, but the majority of it was information. And I thought it would have been a lot more effective with all those people brainstorming ideas and how to reach the culture, And so, but anyhow, in that process, I got to meet the professor who is in charge of origins at Pensacola Christian College. And so I encouraged her to look at the hydroplate theory. So again, which museum is going to allow people to think about flood models first, and which college is going to allow people to think about flood models first, and which curriculum? And so we'll see. We'll see what happens. And then my favorite creationist out there, Dr. Randy Galuza, he gave this talk titled Engineered Biology, Genetic and Molecular Links Connecting Environmental Exposures to Regulated Mechanisms Producing Rapid Adaptive Self-Modifications in Organisms. Okay? That's what the titles of a lot of the talks were, And it's like, just think of designed adaptability. There's sensors inside of us at every level the molecular, cellular, tissue, organism, they're all sensing the environment. And he said, you know, you got bears and bunnies and foxes, and what do they do when they get in the Arctic? They all pretty much make the same adjustments. You know, and same way with pythons and boa constrictors. Depending on the environment, they look real similar. They'll make the changes to blend in. And then he had told me earlier, and I got to verify it later, that there was a cave in Vietnam. And inside the cave were blind cave fish. Don't need eyes in a cave with no light. And then the cave collapsed, and the fish got their sight back. So they're sensing the environment, and they're making the appropriate changes. And you can't do that by blind chance, random, whatever they say. You know, it's regulated, rapid, repeatable, targeted. They say those words in creation journals. They also say them in secular journals too. He said he's got a file of like 200 studies that have words like that. And so Dr. Randy Galuza, I think he is, I have a lot of respect for him. You know, he's really pushing the ball forward. And then this Mark Horstmeyer, I've never heard him speak before, but he was really, really good. You know, he says God apparently torqued the cosmos during his creative process. He's an engineer. He's worked with cars and won a lot of awards. And he thinks that's how you explain dark energy, how the universe is expanding at an accelerated rate. And he thinks it's because God torqued the universe and now it's untorquing. And yeah, he's super smart. You know, he won awards for this. And what did he say? There's 22 design parameters for a Cadillac. For a Corvette, it's like 39. And so yeah, he's super sharp. I got to sit at a table when we were eating. And he was talking to a guy, and it was like a different language. It was so far above my head, I could not understand it. And then when they were done, he looks across the table and goes, so what do you do for a living? You know? And just very personable, and he's from Liberty University, so I got to tell him about my experience there, where I got 55 students who wanted a creation club. 8 of them wanted to run it, and the advisor dropped the ball. So hopefully he'll get that going again. Because who's it going to be, PCC or Liberty, that's going to be the creation of, you know, beacon of creation light first? They each have chapels, you know, or they call them convocation at Liberty. They're flying people in to talk to them. Might as well have a creationist every month or two, and then open it up to the community. And so that was a lot of fun. And then the principle of sufficient description. Yeah, it's you got the theory, physical or conceptual model, and realization or prototype, and then you got testing. And I like what, you know, is it going to work? This might really happen as they get more and more down there, or it's like, no way, it's not going to happen at all. And reality is the peer review for engineers. It either works or it doesn't. You know, and that's what you have to talk about. Is it high confidence science or low confidence science? You know, there's a lot of discussion about observable science and historical science. And they put them on the same level, kind of. I like how Rod Stadler does it in his Scientific Approach to Evolution or something like that. It's high confidence science is observable and testable and repeatable and no bias and double blind tests. That's high confidence science. And low confidence science isn't any of those. And when we're looking at bones in the dirt, it's not high confidence science. We can't observe and test that. So I'd like to make that distinction too. Oh, this one was kind of a neat talk too. This was Naomi Lee. From Creation to Innovation, Surface Engineering Inspired by God's Design. And it says water vapors tend to be pinned on extremely small peaks and condensed as water droplets. And it's pretty interesting. It talked about hydrophilic, that surface that absorbs water, it attracts water, and you can see that on the top, the first and third ones where water just kind of covers it. And then there's hydrophobic surfaces where it repels water. And the interesting thing is she'd go out in the morning and she'd see there was water droplets on the petals, which are hydrophobic. They repel water, and yet the water's there. And the leaves, there's no water. So I'm thinking maybe the leaves absorb the moisture and then it just goes into the plant. I'm not sure. But she had some really neat pictures. You ever seen a petunia like that? You know, if you get real close, that's what it looks like. Or a chrysanthemum, you know, that's what it looks like when you zoom in on it. And here's some of the other talks that were available. Chariot Wheels in the Red Sea Gulf of Aqaba, a comparative analysis of the evidence. That was by Nate Loper. And he went through and he said, you know, those things that grow up and out, like the chariot wheels, he says there's coral that does that too. And then that picture of the golden chariot wheel, he actually found, he thinks that it's a pulley. a wheel, pulley in a wheel is what he thinks it is. So he doesn't think those, that's evidence of Pharaoh's chariot wheels in the Gulf of Aqaba. So that's not, but that doesn't mean he didn't cross there. That just means those aren't parts of his chariots is what he thought. Then there was evidence for multiple tree rings per year. And that's a tough one. You know, that's what they bring up, saying that the Earth is, you know, older than 6,000 years or whatever. But you can get multiple tree rings in a year. So every year, you can't, that's an inexact science too. And then microbes in rocks challenge the geological time scale. And I think it was that one where they had mentioned rock ice. And I asked, well, where did the rock ice come from? And they gave me the evolutionist thing where there's a lagoon that keeps drying out and you get all this salt, and then there's the creation perspective where the water hits the basalt and evaporates, and that's how you get all these salt layers. But the hydroplate theory explains it pretty well. And so I suggested that they take a look at that. And then pecking away at woodpecker baraminology, that's Dr. Joel Brown. He's really good, really sharp, very good organizer, very fun. And then there was human sexuality as part of God's design by Danny Faulkner. He says creationists don't talk about it, but God designed it, so let's talk about it, you know? And so that was an interesting one. Oh, and this one, utilizing watershed maps and drone aerial photography to understand Earth's surface features eroded by the receding flood. This is by Kevin Horton. And if you ever get a chance to listen, or just search him on YouTube, he's incredible. He is so enthusiastic about what he does. You know, and you see footage like you've never seen before because he flies these drones around. And he used to be a pastor, so he knows how to talk. So he knows how to communicate the idea. And otherwise, he'll go up in his ultralight, you know, that wing that flies. He'll go up there and take footage too. And is really good. I really enjoyed his talk. I got up there right away and thanked him. Oh, and how about this one for a title? Deconstructing Lucy. Now that title I understand. Okay, this is by Dr. Carl Werner. And he went through and point by point by point by point just showed how Lucy is not human and is an ape. And it just went on and on and on. It was really a thorough shellacking of Lucy as a human. It was just very good. And then this one, I think, was Indirect Evidence of Great Longevity in T-Rex and Four Sauropod Dinosaurs by Jake Hebert, I think. This is where they talked about the soft tissue. And this says that collagen has a maximum life expectancy of 4,800 years. Okay, but they were having some reproducibility issues with it. So that one we can't put out there as strong as we did before. And then it says they were talking about Lucy and Neanderthals and all that, and there's a prediction. That's what I like, predictions. You know, if this theory's right, what should we find? It says DNA can be found in at least some of these fossils, and if we can sequence them and align them, they will be similar to human DNA. And I like that. That's a good prediction. I would agree with that. And it says we need to pressure mainstream scientific institutions to look for this DNA where they don't expect to find it, but we do. And that's what Dr. Galuzzi, he took over at ICR, and he said, why didn't the creationists find the soft tissue in the dinosaur bones? You know, that should have been our baby, but we weren't. Oh, this blood vessels too with blood clots. It's very interesting there. These are osteocytes, those are bone cells. It says drowning victims develop intravascular coagulation, that's blood clots, 13 times more frequently than non-drowning cardiac arrests. And 80% of the drowning victims in the study showed signs of clotting. And what do we find in dinosaur bones? Clotting. And there's a pretty strong argument that the dinosaurs drowned based on their blood. And then ancient soft tissue atlas, that's where they're trying to have a depository of all these soft tissue photographs. But they got the most of these osteocytes. That's 100-some. That's the bone cells again. And they want to make those so people can access them. This research assistance database, that's radcreationeducation.org. And I just typed in dino soft tissue, and you get all these articles on it. So if anybody's doing research here or online, that might be a good place to start if you're researching. And then we've got newcreation.blog. So again, we've got everything we need. And apparently the dinosaur feather talk got pretty heated, apparently, which isn't a bad thing. Because that was neat, because Saturday, Eric Hovind did the devotional in the morning. And he basically says, hey guys, this is our practice. This is where we sharpen each other. This is where we have disagreements, and that's fine. You know, we just want to make ourselves sharp so when we get in the game, then we're good. And he had I didn't get a picture of it, but he showed practice players, you know, football players in their practice jersey. They're going at it at practice so they can shine in the game. And he says that's what we're doing this weekend at this conference. We're going at it at this conference so that we can shine in the game. And keep in mind, we're all on the same team. And that was really encouraging to hear. And again, when we went down there as the Hydroplate guys, we were welcomed, we were respected, our ideas were not shot down. It was a lot of fun. And then we come to the open mic session. This is for if you have something to say or if your paper wasn't accepted into the conference, you could go up and present it. So this is uncensored, but they said, tomatoes will be thrown. And there was a full room. You know, there was 3 other sessions going on, so I'm not sure what was happening in the other sessions, but this room was pretty full. And there I am in front of a lot of scientists, a lot of people who really know what they're talking about. But I want them to be exposed to the hydroplate theory. You know, I want them to at least look at it. So I was willing to take a tomato or 2 or 40 or 50 to help them realize that the hydroplate's out there. And this is some of the instructions.
We've got 3 speakers in the lineup. We've got Brian, will be starting us off, followed by Marcus Ross and Carla. Each speaker gets 10 minutes with 5 minutes of questions afterwards. The questions are a little more back and forth than a typical one. You won't have a mic for the questions, so you're just kind of parliament, like UK Parliament style, yelling kindly your question to the person. Each person in here has a tomato, hopefully.
Except me.
Except the speaker. So here's how the tomato works. And we kind of vote at the end of the session how much you dislike the idea by throwing a tomato. And you get to reload. So you don't have to like save your tomato to the end. And just have fun with it. Nobody take anything too seriously in how many tomatoes you receive or how many tomatoes you throw. With that then, we are going to turn it over to Brian. Your 10 minutes begin as soon as I sit down. On your marks, get set, go.
So that was it. This was really fun. They weren't real tomatoes. They were like plastic, pillowy type thing, but you could throw them. This was really a lot of fun. And so I gave them my Grand Canyon call to action. Has anybody not seen how the Grand Canyon formed? So basically the Grand Canyon, this is what's happening. It flows in at 3,100 feet and it flows out at 1,200 feet and it flows right through something that's a mile higher than that. It should have gone around the top or the bottom, but it didn't. Okay, that's the Grand Canyon. But before you can even make the Grand Canyon, you gotta have the Great Denudation. That's where you remove 1,000 feet of sediment over the area the size of Vermont. 10,000 square miles, almost as big as Massachusetts. But that has to be washed away, and geologists can't explain it. They really can't, and secularists can't. But what did cause it? You got these 2 huge lakes on top of the Colorado Plateau. One's twice as big as Lake Michigan, the other one's the size of Lake Huron. And once it started overflowing, it cut down until it hit something hard, and then it spread out. That's how you get the funnel right there. So that's 1,000 feet of sediment that's missing, so there's nothing pushing down, so that Kaibab limestone bulges and it cracks. And then the water flows through the crack and it undercuts Hopi Lake. So now you got 2 lakes catastrophically draining, sheet eroding everything except for a few places like Cedar Mountain and Red Butte. It erodes all of that away, and that's how you get the Great Denudation. So now all that's gone, so that whole area bulges and cracks. So the water flows through the crack, and then it cuts down. It should have got wider, but it didn't. So the basement rock bulged and cracked. That's how you get Grand Canyon bulging and cracking 3 times. And then I pointed them up to the National Park website. You go into nps.gov, get into Grand Canyon's website, and you go down to nature and then to geology, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you see 4 hypotheses. And I read through and showed them what the fatal flaws were for each one of those theories. And then it says, was this page helpful? And so I encouraged everybody to go there and click your opinion. I put no. You know, none of your theories work. Why don't you put the hydroplate theory down there? And then you can hit the Grand Canyon Geologic Formation button and scroll all the way down to the bottom. And this is the last sentence you're going to read. It's very hard to find. It should be plastered all over the front of the website, but this is what it says. Perhaps the biggest question of all, how the Colorado River chose this course and began carving the Grand Canyon, still awaits a clear answer. And so was this place helpful? And I put no, and then I put the answer you're waiting for to explain the Colorado River is a hydroplate theory. See Brian Nichols' YouTube channel. You're welcome. Okay, and so this is what I want a lot of people to do, and then I showed them this on page 247 of creationscience.com. You get all the theories on the top, all the features on the side, and then you can decide for yourself which one makes the most sense. And you read it red, yellow, green. Red means serious problems, yellow means moderate problems, and green means no problem. And you go down under the hydroplate way on the left, and it's all green. And yet they don't talk about it in class. When I was talking to the school board, I was suggesting that there's a good theory that can explain a lot of this, and the school board was not interested. And I do have a playlist for what I did say. I went there half a year trying to get things changed. And it's on my YouTube channel called Solidify Your Faith. Go down to the school board playlist. And I was able to wish them a Merry Christmas in December. But I also pointed out that Jesus said if you cause one of these little ones to stumble, it'd be better if a millstone were hung around your neck and you'd be cast into the depths of the sea. So anyhow, and then this is how I keep score. This is the Gallup poll, creation versus evolution. That top line is God made man in his present form less than 10,000 years ago. That's the majority of Americans. The bottom line is man evolved over millions of years without God's help. Okay? The minority is taking the majority's money, taxes, to teach the minority view. And I think that's changed, and I'm so glad Sonia's running for school board. You know, that's what we need. We need some good people in there that want accurate textbooks. Make it a campaign issue. You know, there's errors in the textbook, and the school board does nothing about it, besides contact their law firm. Okay, and so anyhow, but what really concerns me is if you go up at 2012, we're at 46%, we're dominating. They're at 15%, they're getting there. But then 2024, we're dropped to 37%. They've went up to 24%. Look at the trend. They're trending up, we're trending down. We got to do something different. And so that's why I'm trying to get these creation clubs going. And every community should have one. Everybody should be doing this. Because if they're lying to them in the textbooks, how are they going to think if they don't see another perspective? And again, I hope that either PCC or Liberty, you know, blazes the trail. You know, use your resources to impact your community, not just your students. And I think that would be very, very effective. And so then I got done with all of that. That's 10 minutes cut into 4 or 5. And this is what happened. Thank God there's young people here. You know, a lot of creation organizations, it's a lot of people older than me. So that's not a good sign. So we need to do what we can, and I'm done. Thank you so much.
All right, here come questions. Nice and loud, Mark.
So how did it initially, those lakes, like the dam broke, how did that start? Just the water came in?
Well, there's three different options. Well, first you got to get the lakes all the way up there. So you got.
The lakes are up there.
Okay, the lakes are up there. Well, it could have been some other lake breaching through it, so that could have done it. And also it could have. What?
What made that break then?
Well, there's a lot of water during after the flood. There's the oceans are warmer, so there's a lot more precipitation coming down, so they could be filling it up with precipitation. And also there could be block faulting happening with the Rockies sinking in, squirting the magma to the side, and that could have block faulted a thing up there, which caused it to overflow. So we don't know exactly how it did, but I think there's 3 options for it.
On this account, how did the side canyons get eroded?
Oh, I forgot, yeah. It's when it's cutting through there, it's cutting below the water table. So the water that's in the sediment is gushing to the side and then bringing with it sediment, and then it's dropping down on it. And that's how you get the side canyons just as low as the Grand Canyon without a river.
So it would need to be relatively unconsolidated.
Well, yeah, well, it's... Well, some of it would be, but it had to be consolidated enough so that the Kaibab Plateau was strong enough, or the Kaibab limestone was strong enough to make that funnel. So Walt thinks it's maybe a couple hundred years after the flood. You know, because if it was right after the flood, then the sides could have slumped in. You know, it wouldn't have those big spires. They'd have been a lot weaker.
Really nice overview of spillover theory, which I thought was really helpful, so thank you for that. That's a position that's been held by both creationists and secular geologists, right? John Douglas and his associates. You can go back to Newberry in the 1800s. So spillover, okay, I get that. Why do you call it hydroplate theory? That's a tectonic idea. I don't see the connection.
Right. We got to get the mountains formed. We got to get the plateaus formed, and it's just one segment of this hydroplate. The hydroplate there is 600 pages. Okay, and it's got the origin of Grand Canyon, the origin of comets, frozen mammoths, limestone, radioactivity. So this is just a piece of it. And so that's why it's called the hydroplate theory, because the hydroplate slid together, and that's a whole nother talk in itself. But if you want to see it, you go into my website, Solidify Your Faith, and I got a playlist just for the hydroplate. You're going to see a 2-minute animation, an 8-minute explanation by Dr. Walt Brown, who got his PhD from MIT, and then a 2-minute video of NASA Discovery validating this theory. So in 15 minutes, you'll have a rough overview of the hydroplate theory.
Yeah, and I'm aware of what the hydroplate theory is.
Okay.
I understand that. You could have spillover and not hydroplate. You could have hydroplate and cut the canyon during the flood. They don't seem to be talking about the same problems. Right?
Well,
one's a tectonic explanation, and one is a drainage explanation.
Right. But what I like about the hydroplate, it gives you all the options all at once, and then it gives you all the features all at once. You know, and that's what I'd like to see is if they're going to publish in your journal, have them put some predictions down. You know, if their hypothesis is right, put some predictions down, so then, you know, they'll know if they're on the right track or not. Something to think about.
Going once, going twice. Okay, we're gonna vote.
Oh, can I add one thing? Can I add one thing? I met like 30 students who wanted to make a creation club here. So that's something you guys, if you got a Christian organization, Christian college, you know, they could have a creation club there. Or any college, really. Anyhow.
All right. By a show of tomatoes, what's your view of this talk? 3, 2, 1. Exactly one. Marcus Ross, come on down.
Solidify Your Faith, you said?
Yeah, Solidify Your Faith at Solidify Your Faith, that's on YouTube. I'll give you my card. Yeah. And it's, oh, I appreciate that. He said it was a good presentation. And so I got one tomato. There was one guy that tried to, his talk was that behemoth wasn't real, it was just a figurative. It was just figurative. And he must have got every tomato. It was just a shower of tomatoes on him. And so that was the conference, and then it wound up. And so again, we planted some seeds with the president, the chaplain, or the pastor, the professor, and another professor. And so we'll see. We'll see which college allows students to think about flood models first. We'll see. And I'm pretty excited that one of the big creation organizations is going to sell this book. Going to sell this book at one of the big creations. It's not on their website, so I'm not going to say who it is yet. But yeah, that's one of the big dominoes to fall. The next domino to fall is which creation museum is going to allow people to think. Put both the models up there and put the predictions underneath and see what happens. And so then 30 students, the professor has their emails. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then the next night I met somebody at the talk in Milton who goes to the college there. And so that was the next Sunday. But anyhow, so then we took a week at the beach, spoke at a church, and then we're going up to this Creation Museum near Nashville in Dickson, Tennessee. And I want to stop there. I haven't been to the Ark yet, but I wanted to stop there. And we're going along, and I'm thinking, normally I take Sundays off. Don't like to do anything. But we're traveling. It's like, if we could get up there in one day, we could spend the whole day there and leave stuff in our car, in our hotel room instead of in our car. And so we're going along, and it's like 10:30, 11 at night. And guess what? Somebody put something on the road, and that wasn't good. I was so glad it didn't hit the engine, whatever it was. So then, whatever. But long story short, I got it changed, put the donut on. I was going to get towed, but then I thought, well, they'll just tow me to a garage, and then what do we do? And so... and then as I'm towing it, there's some DOT guy from Tennessee pulls up behind me. He's got a jack and the wrenches and stuff. So that was kind of fun. And then we get there, and then the next day I'm calling, who can fix my tire? So I call the tire places. It's like, yeah, I need a rim. Oh, we don't do rims. You got to go to Nashville for that. And I said, what if I could have them send it to you? Could you do it? It's like, no, no, no. And then I called Victory Nissan, and I said, yeah, I need a rim. Oh yeah, no problem. We can get it tomorrow. So that was really neat. And he brought it in, and he took it, and he says, well, the tire's 50-50. We might be able to save it. So then that day we go to the Creation Museum, which was a lot of fun. And it's the largest science museum in Tennessee, and it's huge, just phenomenal. And I was talking to Vito at the hotel, and he said, yeah, it was a community college. And then a tornado went through and destroyed it. And so then they bought it. I didn't verify it, he said, but they got it for $2.3 million. And they sunk in. Now it's $6 million. So they put a few $1 million in, and they sure did. Everything is first class, just top notch everywhere. This Creation Superstore is just the best creation store I've ever been to. They had so much stuff, and I think you can get some of that online. So we go through there, and they got a whole bunch of stuff for kids. You know, this is like a Pinewood Derby thing. You can use different cars, different weights, different things, see what works. And I enjoyed this one too. These are magnets you stick to the wall, and you can make this, you drop the tennis ball down and it goes down through your things. And then this was a make your own topographic map. You can pile up this sand and it'll make different elevations on there. They had one for sound. They had one, this one was a heat. It would look at the heat, and then there you are. It was pretty neat. And then you had this one. The second day, I went there and spent some time. I love water, damming it up and playing with it. This is the Bernoulli principle. Those balls are floating in air. Can things roll uphill? They actually can if it's done right. And they can dig for dinosaur bones. You make something here and you spin the thing and it's like an earthquake. But then they also have stuff for the really brainy people, like quantum chemistry or fine tuning or molecular molecules. I took a picture of everything. The DNA, this is an animal cell and this is a plant cell, rather different. How could they evolve from the same thing? And it talks about how we see and how we hear, which I needed because my ears were plugged up, and then how we taste. It was just a really informative, the signage was just so professional. I mean, everything they had was just first class, the miracle of our foot with these 3 arches in there. Just amazing. Maybe if I don't have time to go into it now, but maybe I'll just do a talk on, what was there. And then they had live things too. You got Dory and Nemo there, and coral. You see the pufferfish in the bottom middle there? There's the pufferfish sticking out of there, and coral growing. And they also had live lizards. I don't know what that was called, but they let them go. This was a rescue. Some place, it wasn't taking care of it. And that's, I think, how they get a lot of their animals. And so they take care of them. And it was really a neat texture, really, really fun. They got your dinosaurs, a big dinosaur room. That thing moves around. They talk about reptiles becoming a bird and what all the changes, the lungs have to change, the heart has to change. From the heart of a bird has 4 chambers, a reptile has 3 chambers. It's just a lot of things that have to change. And then they had sharks. What could be better than sharks? Oh, and then I was on the beach. There was a guy fishing. I said, you ever catch a shark? And then his friend pulls in a shark about this long. And then as he's trying to get it off, something hits the thing, and he pulls that in, another shark. And yeah, so anyhow, they're out there. But this megalodon, this thing is huge. That's how big his mouth would be, but he'd use the great white shark as bait, This thing is bigger than a humpback whale. And there's the teeth, and then you got the big crocodiles that they find in the fossil record. And then they had like the jungle animals too. They really had the Arctic animals, and it was really, really well done. And it talks about the fossils. Are they still being made? The living fossils. They just had everything. And even these fast fossils. You get these stone teddy bears. They put them in the mineralized waterfalls, and then in about 3 to 4 months, they're fossils. So yeah, it's really interesting. I encourage anybody to go there that has the time or is going by there. They got this stegosaur. This is from a temple in Cambodia. There's the stegosaur in there, and that's from 1,000 years ago. People clearly saw dinosaurs. They got the butterfly collection, the bug collection. Those things are about as big as my hand almost, or my fingers for sure. And then they had these really good videos playing at almost every room and in the hallway. And he went where he got this polystrate fossil. That's a tree standing up through up many layers of sediment. And those sediments are supposed to be laid down slowly and gradually. And I come out of there thinking, boy, that David Reeves, he's really talented. Like really talented. I remember, 20 or 30 years ago, he gave us a tour through the Wyatt Archaeological Museum, which was smaller than this room. It was a converted gas station. And to see what he's doing now, it's like, wow, it's God really, he's really used his gifts to glorify God. And I got to meet him. He was there walking around, and I got to talk to him. It's like, wouldn't it be neat to give people a chance to think about flood models, put them both in there and let people think? Because they don't have a flood exhibit yet. And I hope that he does that. Maybe they'll be the first one. And so I got to talk to him. Super nice guy. Every employee there was super nice. And it was so relaxing going there. They didn't bus us around or pay for parking. It was really, really a relaxing time. And they had a talk by Dr. Galuza, my hero. And then they had this 60-foot planetarium. It's one of the top 10 in the world. And you go in there to just lay back in those seats and watch the solar system or the whole universe, whatever you want. But yeah, it was just phenomenal. And again, their bookstore is second to none. They're going to have a creation conference next June 24th, 25th, and 26th, I think. And I think everybody, I'm going to go. It's going to be a lot of fun there. And so then the next day, they got the rim, but they didn't have the tire wouldn't work. So we had to get the tire the next day. And so then we wait around, and I go back there, and I got to play with more of the toys and stuff. Oh, what did we do that morning, too? We took a whole bunch of their flyers, and everybody can take one, these Wonder Centers, and we went to 17 gas stations and restaurants and stores around our hotel and hotels and asked if we could put some in their, if they'd want to display them. And a lot of them did. And so that was a lot of fun, so hopefully more people get there. But then we went to get our tire put on and take off, and they said, you know what, the tire's not going to make it today. And I said, why not? And they said, well, it just says, it shows up on the computer, not coming today. And my guess is a preloader put it on the wrong truck. The delivery guy found it and sent it in. And so I said, well, how often does this happen? They said, well, it usually gets here like 90% of the time. And so then so I got to wait another day. And so then on the way out, I stopped by the guys at the big upper desks, and I said, you guys might want to consider using UPS to get your tires. And he said, because the guys you're using aren't doing a good job. And he said, this happened 2 weeks ago. My brother took a day off to get his tires, and they didn't show up. And then he said, and then what did he do? He said, we'll find you a tire. I said, but, who was it? I forget his name, but he made those calls, on Monday. He says, I'll make a bigger circle. And so he called around, and he found a used tire in town that had 3/32 of a tread on it. It's like, well, I just need to get to Minnesota. And so he said, yeah, I think it'll get you there. And so that's what we did. And so, yeah, it got us to Minnesota. But yeah, the Victory Nissan of Dickson, they had their customer motto. I should have showed it, but they really did a good job. I've heard of places where if they find out you're from out of state, they just really rake you over the coals. But not Victory. They did really, really good. All right. Are there any questions on what we covered here at all? Any questions? Yes, Sonia.
Did you say there was a free science book that we could get?
Yeah. Well, you have access to it. Go into creationscience.com, and then you can put your email in, and then you can see it for free. And it's really neat. You can search stuff. And at page 447 to 449, that's where you can look at the predictions. All right. You are dismissed if you want. Otherwise, we got some current events. This is some information, some websites you might want to take a look at. This is from the Highwire last week. I'm a big Highwire fan. Shows that the FDA approved Moderna's mRNA flu vaccine. What did they use mRNA to make? Anybody remember? The COVID shots, yeah. And did that go through all the safety trials? No, it's an emergency use. See, now they have time to go through the safety trials, but they're not. And it says that they compared the company's vaccine with one made by GSK. They aren't comparing it with saline. And that's how all the vaccines are. The Highwire has sued the government to see if they got any placebo-based studies, and they don't. They always compare it with another vaccine. That's like comparing whiskey with vodka. See, you got the same crashes, so there's no difference, so it's safe, you know? And so I encourage you to watch that. And I was going through it, and I just listened to this week. If you want more information on that, and that's all I do. I just give people information and make your own decisions. And clearly, we're not getting all the information we need from our government and our media. And if you're interested in that, go into thehighwire.com, episode 339. It's The Placebo Lie. Del Bigtree's interviewed on Epoch Times, and he says this is the best interview he's ever given. He just hit the ball out of the park. And so what happened? You know, the flu shot, back in February, they denied it. They had a different leader then, but it says it doesn't reflect the best available standard of care. So it was denied in February. He left, somebody else is in there, now they're rubber stamping it. And this was a leaked memo that the former guy said, we will reappraise safety and be honest in our vaccine labels. He was trying to set the culture there. We're going to be honest in our vaccine labels. And boy, did he get the firestorm thrown at him. 12 former FDA chiefs blast this guy Prasad's move to toughen vaccine standards. And now he's gone. So, but then going back to the COVID thing, anybody see Fauci take the Fifth Amendment over 100 times? Okay, well, Trump's respecting the Biden pardon, and he took the Fifth Amendment more than 100 times. He wanted to answer what color his tie was. He wanted to answer what day of the week it was. And he was pardoned for potential federal offenses between January of 2014 and January of 2025. You know, why would you need a pardon? And so that's, you know, that's just all has to do with, you know, the mRNA technology is in that window. And so I just want people to get all the information. And also, that one too, he's been going to every country. He's trying to, it's like America can't fight this alone. But he went to France, and he used to be able to get hydroxychloroquine like candy. You just buy it off the shelf. And then when COVID hit, they made you get a prescription. Oh, and anybody, there was a big debate, Candace Owens versus Andrew Wilson last week. And so they debated whether there was overwhelming evidence that Tyler Robinson did that. You can check it out. This is a review on Dave Smith. That was what his opinion was. But what did the market say? This is Polymarket. You can bet on anything. And when that debate started, it dropped. You know, what were they betting on? Tyler Robinson's convicted of homicide. Oh, and then just episode 163. This was rather interesting. Charlie wrote a letter to Netanyahu in May. And Baron Coleman goes through this letter, and it's pretty interesting what he's saying. And he kind of connects some different dots, and you know, it's pretty interesting to see that. That's Baron Coleman, episode 163. And then the other thing that I just listened to the other day was Alex Newman talking about the planning for an economic reset. So the less we depend on the government, the better off we're going to be. Okay, and that climate change thing hasn't gone away. You know, they still have the UN still has the ability to tax shipping, but Trump says, hey, if you do it, we're going to sanction you. So they aren't doing it now, but that's what could happen. And there's an executive order where they can put AI on federal land. Okay, they really want those data centers. And but anyhow, those are some websites that I think that you might get some information. Again, I'm not here to tell you what to think, but I want you to get all the information. Okay, is there, and any questions on that at all? The date when it'll happen, I don't know. I don't know, but they've sure been talking about Agenda 2030 a lot. You know, during COVID, everything was Agenda 2030. So I don't know, but there seems to be a big push to get data centers, a big push for other things too. So that's outside the creation bubble, but we are all impacted. And so again, we'll just, I'm happy, I'm excited about where we're at. We're seeing the Big Bang fall apart. We're seeing evolution fall apart. We're seeing origin of life fall apart. We're seeing the geologic column fall apart. And I believe we're going to see the plate tectonics fall apart too. And it's exciting to be a creationist. We have the winning hand. It's like Del Bigtree. They ask him, well, why do you keep going? He says, because we win. We got the royal flush. And I think that's what the creationists have. When the cards are laid down, we win.